Today we're here in my backyard with Leon Nikiforakis, a longtime resident of West Swanzey, now living in Keene,
Right.
but longtime resident. There's a lot of stories to tell about this whole area here.
That's right.
Yeah, so it started, gosh, a long time ago.
Yeah, my parents came to this country in 1914, and they were sponsored by the Greek Orthodox Church in Lowell.
Right, yeah.
And they came to, they settled in Marlborough, New Hampshire.
Yeah. What did they do in Marlborough?
And my dad worked in a mill. He made horse blankets for the military, for the army, and whoever needed them. And there was, my mother had told me a story back when I was real young about a little bell that used to ring for Dad to go to work. And amazingly, this little bell ended up in a bell tower in the downtown Marlborough.
And it's still there.
And it's still there.
Yeah.
And there's a little plaque that says about the story of the bell. And so they were there till about 1919, when Yale University was received a big portion of land.
The land that's off Route 10 there?
Yeah, off Route 10, and it was donated by, I believe it was donated by New England Bar. I'm not sure, but anyway, they started to buy some land also, and they bought this land that was called Porter Farm, which included about 100 acres of land, and so they sold it to my dad and my mother and father in 1919, and that
was like 50 acres, right?
Yeah, they kept 50 acres because they wanted to square off their property that they had, and this land is located on it was then the Route 10, and now it's Sawyer's Crossing Road, and it's right next to where the Keene Gas Company has their property.
Right, right. So, do you remember growing up on the farm at all?
Oh yes, yeah. I was born on a farm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was born. I was there, and I had 5 sisters, and 3 of them were born there also. And we were brought in by Dr. Hopkins.
Dr. Hopkins of the Whitcomb Hall.
Yeah,
fame.
yeah, Dr. Hopkins from West Swansea, and he was the doctor of the time. He used to have house calls, and in his book he talks about how much he was paid, and all that. Yeah. Very funny.
When you were mentioning to me that Dr. Hopkins was the man who delivered you, and you had mentioned a little bit about pet pills and politics, I actually got a copy of it, and I have a signed copy of the book by Arthur Hopkins, and it's really interesting because you were telling me a little bit about the times, but this book has so much information. And, he talks about where he grew up, because unlike George Whitcomb from the Whitcomb Hall, George had a lot of money. This guy came from nothing, and he was actually very sickly as a child.
That's right.
Yeah. And then he grew up to be this great doctor from the area, and it sounds like he did a lot. Yeah. Besides delivering you.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, do you remember Dr. Hopkins at all from seeing him around?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
One time when I was real young, maybe in the 2nd or 3rd grade, I was at school and I punctured my hand.
With what?
With a pencil, and the lead was in my hand. So I went to see Dr. Hopkins, and by then he was kind of shaky when he was pulling the lead out.
Right.
And he said, "Where did this happen?" And I said, "It happened in school." He says, "Okay, the school will pay for it." So I think it was maybe 50-cent charge or something like that.
Yeah.
And then of course Dr. Hopkins, he was on the school board. He was a member of the school board at that time, and I went to Cutler School, 8th grades, and we had a graduation, and it was held here at the Whitcomb Hall. And Dr. Hopkins gave out the diplomas, and I believe that was the last time that he was able to do that, because in 1948 he was getting a little bit elderly, and that was the end of his tour.
Right. Sounds like if he was shaking a little bit, maybe he had
Yeah.
Parkinson's or something,
Yeah.
and but that, well, he was in his early 70s then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he had a big part of helping out with Whitcomb Hall, which is the building that we're in today.
That's right.
Right. And between George and Dr. Hopkins and the community, they were all able to help build this building.
That's right.
Now, one of the things that I remember you mentioning is that you used to have dances here and dance lessons.
That's right. I believe I must have been in maybe the 5th grade when there was a dance instructor that came up, a teacher came up from Massachusetts, and she had brought a piano player.
Oh.
And that piano is still on the stage at this day, yeah. And there was a large number of students here taking dancing lessons. And,
did you take dance lessons?
well, I did, but you'd never know it today. But anyway, it was, we had dancing lessons there. And also, the hall was used for minstrel shows. And the drum corps, the West Swanzey Drum and Bugle Corps, we had a minstrel show, and we held it here at Whitcomb Hall. And there was representatives from Winchester came up from the fire department, and they thought that, we put on a good show. So they said, would you put it on in Winchester? And of course, we'd have to change the names of the people because the jokes were according to the local people.
Right.
And of course, today you could never get away with
I'm
telling
sure.
jokes about people like that.
Right.
They weren't real bad jokes, but they were funny jokes, you know.
Right. Well,
And-
it was more like vaudeville.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It was. And the minstrel show, the people were, the whole drum corps was on the stage, and then also the Athletic Association, the West Swansea Athletic Association, had them, was doing them too. I think Vic Patnode was president of the Athletic Association at the time, and he was the master of ceremonies, and he did a marvelous job. And so they were held here at the Whitcomb Hall.
Yeah. Now, you said you'd never been upstairs, but there's a balcony here.
That's true.
Yeah, that's hard to believe in
Yeah.
all these years that because you lived right in this neighborhood. Because
True.
now you did live on that farm,
Right.
But then your folks moved.
Right.
So what happened then?
Well, I was 13 when my dad passed away, and we were living on the farm up to that time. And back then it was a vegetable farm. My dad used to peddle vegetables wholesale in Keene. And I remember when I was about 5 years old, I used to cry so I could ride with him. And of course, he'd leave early in the morning with his pickup truck, and he would peddle vegetables to the stores around Central Square in Keene. There used to be a lot of small mom and pop stores. And so he sold so many that we couldn't produce enough. So he used to buy vegetables, like if there was a cornfield somewhere, like in Hinsdale or Winchester, that way he would purchase it. And one day we were down in Winchester, no, I think it was in Hinsdale, on the close to the Northfield Road, and there was a Polish fella, and he had a whole field of cucumbers. And of course, I must have been about 8 or 9 years old, And my dad with his Greek accent, and this Polish fellow with his Polish accent. And of course, neither one of them could really speak that good English with their, as far as I could see. So they were counting these cucumbers, and I was figuring, I didn't like the way they were counting them. And so my dad says, "You be quiet," says, "we know what we're doing." So what they would do is they would take 10 cucumbers in each hand, 5 cucumbers in each hand. And so they'd have 10 cucumbers and they'd throw them in a pile. And then the Polish fella, he would throw 10 cucumbers in a pile. And when they got through, they would put 1 cucumber in another pile, so that when they got through, he knew 10 piles would be 100 cucumbers.
Oh, I see.
And I spoke up and I says, "I can count." They says, "You be quiet. We know what we're doing." So he had a whole truckload of cucumbers, and they knew how many cucumbers were in that truck. So they were pretty smart. Either one of them they weren't educated. You know, they came from the old country and they didn't have the education.
Yeah.
But then Dad would bring them up and wholesale them.
Oh, right.
And because he had such a big number of customers,
Right.
and we couldn't possibly provide enough cucumbers or vegetables for, you know, the demand.
Right.
But we did have a little vegetable stand in front of the house on Route 10, and we'd sell during the day. We'd sell fresh vegetables, and then when after he passed away, we moved into the village. My dad had purchased the Evans Hotel, which was right next to the mill in West Swanzey, in the village of West Swanzey. And he had purchased it for my brother Peter, so that he was in the service at the time. And there was a little diner, a little tiny building on the side of the hotel. And he thought that it would make a good business for him when he got out of the service.
So we're talking about Nick's now, right?
Now we're talking about the formation of Nick's Restaurant way back then.
Yeah.
And the boys there that own it now are, that was their dad, my brother Peter.
Right. Well, when I was growing up, I always heard about Nick's Restaurant. But I never had a chance to go in because I was from Keene. I was, much younger. But there was a lot of transformation on that restaurant. Back in the early 17 and 1800s, you were telling me that they did wrestling upstairs?
Well, the Evans Hotel, it was a big building, and there was the stagecoach used to stop there in the early 1900s, maybe the 1800s probably. And the back end of the building, there was an opening where it could drive right in, like a shed, and the stagecoach could just drive right in there. And there was a huge kitchen in a dining room, and there was a big hall upstairs. And I was told that a lot of the local gentlemen used to wrestle up there. And of course, the building was a fire trap because there was only one set of stairs to go down there. And I remember it when I moved there that it was a complete hall at that time. It had wainscoting like this Whitcomb Hall does, and of course it was plaster walls, and of course it was broken up, pretty much broken up by then. But that's how this. One of the reasons why this town hall was this Whitcomb Hall.
Town hall.
We used to call it the town hall.
I know.
Us natives would call it the West Swansea's town hall. Because we were from West Swansea, we were kind of separate from the rest of the villages. But anyway, this Whitcomb Hall was built because there was no other place in West Swansea that would hold a congregation of people for parties and etc. So it was started from there.
Yeah. So what do you remember? Because you grew up in this little area where you had the mill, you had the railway that was coming through. Actually, you had Whitcomb Hall, you had the churches, you had a Stratton library probably at that time as well.
Yes.
Lots of little grocery stores. I think there was a grocery store on the other side of the covered bridge.
Yeah.
What do you remember? What was your typical day like as a kid?
Well, there was. I lived right close to the mill, in the hotel building, and I would walk to Cutler School, and it was so close that I could come home for dinner. And of course, I'd go into the diner, and my brother Pete would have some lunch for me, and I might wash a couple of dishes for him before I left. And so one of the things we had the drum and bugle corps. And we were well known throughout New England because we used to travel all over in parades and competitions.
What did you play?
I played a baritone horn. The smallest guy had the biggest horn. And I played that off and on for many years, different drum corps. And then we had the mill, the noise from the mill, I remember, was real loud. It was the Athletic Association kept us busy with different games that they had there. They had card games going every night, not gambling games,
Right.
but regular card games.
Kind of stuff. Yeah.
Because back then there wasn't television, and but I do remember when they first bought a television, a little black and white set. They put one upstairs, and boy, everybody started to join the club then because there was a television set there. And then they put in some showers, and a lot of homes didn't have a shower.
So this was right at Nick's? They put
No,
the showers,
this was at the Athletic Association building. Yeah, and the hotel building, some of it was rented. We called it the Evans. It was known as the Evans Hotel way back then, and my brother had the little diner on the side, and in 1953, when I went into service, he moved the restaurant into the main hotel building, and because it was the dining room was set up, a beautiful restaurant, and part of there was one room on the side that was his bedroom. He just opened it all up and made a big dining room, and the kitchen was just made to be a restaurant,
Yeah.
And he had maybe 2 rooms upstairs that he rented, and then he put in a barber came to town, was living in town, and he wanted a place to set up his barber shop, so my brother had a barber shop put in there, so there was a barber shop for quite a few years. And then I believe I had a ice cream bar in there too, ice cream stand, whatever you call it. And I'd get out of high school and come down and open up, and of course we didn't sell much ice cream back then.
But what did you sell a lot of for 10 cents?
Well, we had softball was a big thing in West Swansea. And over at the Brown Memorial Field, when I turned 16, I used to take my brother's Jeep, and there was a bed spring that we got from the dump, and we would drag the ball field with the bed spring.
Yep.
And lo and behold, I'd go there at night, and I had 2 of these little Coca-Cola coolers full of soda, big bottles of soda for a dime, and I'd sell these 2 coolers of soda, and my brother Pete would say, "Make sure you bring the bottles back, because that's where our profit is."
That's
in
right.
The bottles, because we had to pay for the bottles.
Right.
And I was just 16, 17 years old, and I thought that was a big deal, just driving that Jeep around and dragging the field and getting it ready for the teams to play.
Right. It sounds like you had a lot just in this small area. You really didn't have to go outside of Swanzey, or did you go to Keene many times?
Not that much. Of course, we went to Keene for high school.
Right.
And they had a bus that would pick us up, students, but we had to pay like $1 a week to ride the bus.
That's quite a bit, actually.
It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they give you a card, and they'd punch your ticket. And so it had more tickets, more punches than what you'd need for the week, so that you could use it, if you wanted to go on Saturday to the movies, I think. And then I got to a point where I'd say, that's $1. Maybe I'll put it in my pocket. So the Brown farm had a herd of cattle there, and they used to take the milk up to Mackenzie's farm.
Right.
And
Some
so
ice cream.
I would be on a corner when he would pull up. The driver would pull up. I don't know his name now because that was a long time ago. And I would ride up to Keene, and he would stop on Main Street and get his coffee at one of those little snack bars that were there. And it was only like a block away from the high school. And then coming home.
And remember, the high school was downtown then.
The high school was where the middle school.
Right, on Washington Street.
Yeah, on Washington Street.
Yeah.
So we went there. And then coming home, of course the mill was still running was really...
Did it ever shut down at night?
No, they ran 24 hours a day.
Wow.
But there was a lot of people commuting from outside of West Swanzey, and there was a family from a group from Gilsum that would be coming down through as I was getting out of school.
That's a long ways.
So I would be on Winchester Street thumbing a ride home, and so they'd pick me up every day.
Wow.
And
you saved that dollar.
Me and one of my friends from West Swanzey, and there was always 3 or 4 of us there, thumbing a ride back to West Swanzey. So we saved that money too.
Yeah. Good. Well, you said the Athletic Association building was there. It has now been demolished, and they're going to be putting in a park there.
Yes.
So, you know, it'll be nice. I'm sure it was sad to see that building go.
Yeah.
But hopefully they'll be doing something nice with that. And then Whitcomb Hall, they're going to be doing some renovations here, and hopefully in 2016 they'll open it up, and we'll have a new place. Sort of like what you had when you were growing up.
Yeah. You had mentioned about a store. There was 2 stores. There's a store on each side of the bridge.
Really?
On
each end, or?
Each end. On this end, on the Whitcomb Hall end, Steve Gamallo had a little store right next to the river.
So that's where they probably got started.
And that's where he got started. Yeah. And on the other side, Fred Perham had a store in the Athletic Association building, and back that was a store back in the 1800s. Right. Part of it was a grain. They used to sell grain. And then after Fred Perham went out of business, Steve Gamallo rented that store from the Athletic Association, and he maintained the building and for quite a few years until he passed, and then I think his son had it for a while until he built the new store on Route 10.
Right.
And so that was that was a busy place. Steve was very good to the people in West Swansea. He was, and of course, us kids, you know, we were smart Alecks.
Yeah.
And so we'd run across the bridge and call him these funny names, Applehead and all these things. And so he would come out with an orange or something and kind of throw it at us. And he was a baseball player in his younger days. And I'm sure he tried not to hit us, because if he ever hit us with an orange, you can imagine what it would. But he would bounce it off the sidewall of the bridge, you know.
Yep.
And he'd be waiting for us, because we knew when school was out, we'd come running across the bridge and holler some crazy name to him.
Yep.
And
Did you fish? Did you fish,
no,
or did you ever?
No, even to this day I don't fish. No. I always said fishing was for old men, and now that I'm an old man, I still say it's for old men. You know, and I never got into fishing.
No. Well, how about the train? Did you ever take the train into Keene?
The train was so funny. We called it the Toonaville trolley. There was one car with an engine. I don't know if it was in the front or the back, but the back they had a place for. They used to bring the mail down from Keene, and we had a what do you call it? A
caboose? Or?
No. They had a bus, a railroad station over on the other side of this.
What one was that one? Is that Jocelyn?
No, it was. I can't think of the name of the road.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a railroad station there. So 14 years old. A friend of mine and myself, we got on our bicycles and we rode to Keene. And by the time we got to Keene, you know, we got to ride back. So we said, let's see if we can get a ride on the train. So we went to the depot, and they said, sure.
For how much?
10 cents. And they put our bikes in the back with the mail, and we rode back to West Swansea on a bike, on a train with our bikes in the back.
Yep.
And that was real fun.
Yeah.
But I think I was about 14 years old then.
Can you imagine, you know, like, you're like thinking of things that you did when you were younger. Can you imagine the kids doing this stuff today?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, even when I was growing up, we had fun doing all of these kinds of things. And it's just so nice because it is community, and like all your neighbors knew each other.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
if you did anything wrong, it would get back to your mom.
Yeah.
You knew that. Yeah, yeah.
One time when I was old enough to know better, there was something going on. It may have been a Grange meeting here at the town hall. And I was maybe 17. And I took my brother's Jeep, but I wasn't alone. I had 2 other accomplices. And there was, behind this Whitcomb Hall, the town had a shed which they stored salt in bags. So we loaded the bag, so we carried them out and stuck them in the front door so that they couldn't open the door. Lo and behold, somebody recognized me.
Yeah.
And the town constable went to my brother Peter and said,
Little Leon.
Leon
Yeah.
was involved.
Yeah.
You better have him move him back. So Peter came to me and said,
Get
you
your
got
butt
caught.
out there.
You
Yeah.
got caught. You take the Jeep and drive it back up to the front steps and
Yeah.
load that salt back in and put it back in the shed.
Yeah.
So I did that.
Yeah. Well, it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, yeah.
Well, today we've been at Whitcomb Hall, and I know you've got a lot more stories to tell. But today, our half hour is up.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd love to have you come back again.
All right.
Good. So today we've been in my backyard with Leon Nakafarakis, and we've been at Whitcomb Hall, but we've also taken little trips around West Swanzey through all the memories that you have, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more. So if you're interested in more information about In My Backyard, you can email us at inmybackyardch8@gmail.com. We'll get back to you, and who knows? Who knows where this show could go? So thank you again.
You're welcome.
We'll look forward to Whitcomb Hall being renovated
Yep.
and reopening in 2016. If you're interested in information about that, you can go on the town website for Swanzey and learn about any of the updates for that as well. And
Send money.
yeah. And hopefully this hall will be renewed, as well as other buildings in the town. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you again, Leanne. And we'll see you again in my backyard.